The 8th floor had gone silent. The only sound was the sharp crack of a contract hitting the conference table as Grant Holbrook, our CEO, leaned forward and glared at the woman who had taken over my department less than a day earlier. "What on earth did you just do?" His voice wasn't raised, but it carried enough force to make the glass panels tremble. "Why would you fire the only person I authorized to negotiate?" Valerie Brooks froze. I saw her fingers twitch as she dragged the contract closer. Page after page flipped under her hand in a frantic blur until she stopped at the addendum she had never bothered to read. Her breath hitched. Then, without warning, she let out a sharp, strangled scream, raw, startled, involuntary. I didn't move. I simply watched her while the audit director stepped forward, lips pressed tight. Grant exhaled slowly, anger radiating from him like heat. "Read it out loud," he said, but she couldn't. Her throat had closed around the words. She knew exactly what she was looking at, the clause binding our multi-country partnership to one single name. Mine. 24 hours earlier. None of this had existed. No panic, no shouting, no contract slapped onto a polished table. Just me, just Emma Calder, standing in a cramped office on the 7th floor, staring at Valerie as she crossed her arms and said, almost playfully, "This is the power of this role." I remember how the air tightened between us, how quickly her expression shifted into something triumphant, almost hungry. She had arrived on her first morning determined to make a statement, and apparently, I was the chosen target. I felt the blow land inside me, humiliation mixing with something quieter but stronger, the instinct to stay composed no matter how deep it cut. So I smiled, a small, steady smile that surprised even me. Then I picked up my coat and walked out without asking for an explanation she had no intention of giving. Now, standing on the 8th floor with Valerie's scream still echoing down the hallway, I could feel the past 24 hours waiting to crash open behind me, ready to be retold piece by piece as everything unraveled. My workday in downtown Seattle began normally until whispers drifted across the cubicles that our new department manager, Valerie Brooks, had arrived nearly an hour ahead of schedule. "Have you seen her yet?" Carla asked in a low voice as she passed my desk. She walked in like she was about to fire the whole floor. I tried to smile, but her expression was too tense. "Let me guess, formal suit, fast steps, no eye contact." Carla nodded, and she asked for everyone's personnel files. All of them. That was unusual. I had handled international negotiations for nearly 7 years, including the partnership worth well over $200 million that we were finalizing with our counterparts in Tokyo and Singapore. Any new manager should have wanted a briefing from me first, not a pile of files she didn't understand. Before I could say anything else, Valerie appeared. Sharp heels, sharp chin, sharp stare, everything about her seemed designed to warn the world she wouldn't be ignored. "You?" she said, pointing at me without hesitation. "Emma Calder. My office. Now." Carla's eyes widened, but I followed Valerie into the corner office she had already rearranged. She closed the door with more force than necessary. "You lead the Horizon negotiation," she said, flipping through a thin folder. "Big contract, high visibility, and frankly, too much control in one person's hands. It requires continuity." I replied calmly, "Our partners requested a single representative. Consistency is critical." Valerie waved a dismissive hand. "I'm here to fix that culture. No more sacred cows. No more people treating projects like personal empires. I have never done that," I said, keeping my tone level. She looked up at me, eyes bright with a strange mix of excitement and tension. "Relax. You'll understand soon enough. I am restructuring this entire department before noon." I opened my mouth, but she cut me off. "Some people won't survive the transition," she added quietly. "And I prefer to move decisively." Her certainty felt rehearsed, as if someone had warned her she needed to act boldly from the start. I stepped out of her office with the uneasy sense that she had already made her decisions long before she ever learned what any of us actually did. Valerie didn't ask me to sit. She only folded her hands and said, "Let's make this quick." Her voice had the crisp finality of someone who had practiced this moment in a mirror. I stayed standing, waiting for the explanation she clearly believed I didn't deserve. "I've reviewed enough to see the problem." She continued, "There's misalignment here. Old school habits. Too much independence on your end." She tapped the thin folder in front of her. "This department needs a reset, and that starts with removing people who cling to the past. I lead a multi-country negotiation," I said calmly. "Continuity is part of the agreement. Our partners." She held up a hand. "Spare me the global deal mythology. No one is irreplaceable. Not you. Not anyone." A slow smile formed, the kind meant to look confident but landing somewhere between nervous and cruel. "Effective immediately. You're done here." For a second my breath caught, not from shock, but from the abruptness of it, 12 years reduced to one sharp sentence. "You're terminating me without a briefing or review." "It's not a debate," she said. "This is the power of this role." Humiliation pressed against my ribs, hot and tight, but I swallowed it. Showing pain would only feed whatever need she was trying to satisfy. I straightened my shoulders. "Understood," I said. She expected anger, maybe a plea. Instead, I gave her the smallest, calmest smile I could manage. Her expression flickered, confused for just a moment, before she waved toward the door. I walked out without looking back. At my desk, coworkers stared as I packed. I opened my drawer, took out the Horizon negotiation folder, the one with the contract addendum she never read, and slipped it into my bag. Outside the building, I leaned against a concrete column and opened the folder. My eyes found the single line buried on page 12, the one spelling out that only I was legally authorized to lead the final negotiation. A quiet, steady breath left me as the weight of that sentence settled inside my chest. That night, Seattle's streets blurred past my windshield, but the words in the contract stayed sharp in my mind. Only Emma Calder is authorized to negotiate the final terms. One sentence, buried on page 12, carried the weight of my entire future. When I pulled into my small driveway in Queen Anne, my chest tightened. The mortgage waited every month. My father's medical bills waited too. The ones I had been covering since his stroke 3 years earlier. Missing even one paycheck would slice through everything I had built. Still, I wouldn't pick up my phone, not to call Grant Holbrook, not to call anyone at Axiom. I would not beg for a job I had earned with more than a decade of late nights, flights across oceans, and negotiations that demanded every ounce of control I had. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table, the contract folder open in front of me when my phone buzzed. Carla had texted, "Are you okay? Valerie is spinning a whole story about you." I stared at the message until another bubble appeared. "She told the team you stormed out, said you refused to follow her leadership." My jaw tightened. That was only Valerie's opening move. A few minutes later, a second message arrived, this one from someone in HR I barely knew. "Valerie reported you. Claimed you were combative and unprofessional. Just giving you a heads up." I closed my eyes for a long moment. Even outside the office, she was still reaching for me, still twisting the narrative to justify what she had done. The clause should have been protection, a guarantee of my value. Instead, right now, it felt like a bridge suspended over a drop I wasn't sure I could afford to fall through. I set the contract aside and drew a slow breath, knowing Valerie had no idea what she had ignored the moment she fired me. At 7 minutes past 7 that morning, Grant Holbrook realized something was wrong. He had opened the system to review our negotiation schedule, expecting to see my updates, the overnight revisions I always submitted without fail. Instead, the screen showed a red notice, lead negotiator position vacant. He called HR immediately. "Why is Emma Calder unassigned?" A shaky voice replied. "Valerie Brooks submitted a termination notice yesterday. There was a pause so sharp it seemed to thicken the air. What Grant didn't wait for clarification. He marched straight to the upper office wing, the contract binder already under his arm. When he entered Valerie's office, she jumped to her feet as if caught doing something she shouldn't. "Grant," she began, "I was actually going to update you. Did you fire Emma Calder?" His voice was low, but the edge in it made her step back. Valerie lifted her chin. "Yes. The department needed restructuring. Emma wasn't aligned with my vision. We'll replace her." Grant dropped the binder on her desk with a force that made a pen roll off the edge. He flipped it open to page 12 and shoved it toward her. "Read." Valerie blinked, confused, then scanned the page. Her eyes moved slowly, then faster, until she reached the sentence naming me as the sole authorized representative for the multi-country negotiation. The color drained from her face. Her mouth trembled. A sound tore out of her half-gasp, half-scream. She slapped a hand over her lips. But it was too late. Grant leaned in. "You jeopardized a deal worth well over $200 million because you wanted to restructure Call Emma. Now." Valerie fumbled for her phone, but her fingers wouldn't stop shaking. She didn't dial. She didn't speak. She only stared at the contract, horror widening her eyes. "Call her," Grant repeated. She still couldn't move. That was when Grant understood she had no plan, no backup, and no idea how deep her mistake ran. My phone vibrated nonstop, but none of the numbers were ones I wanted to see. HR, the main office line, a few managers I barely spoke to. I let every call roll straight to voicemail. "Carla finally texted Grant is looking for you. Valerie looks like she hasn't slept." I set the phone down, trying to steady my breathing. The quiet of my kitchen felt thin, like it could split open any second. When the phone buzzed again, I almost ignored it until I saw the caller ID. Grant Holbrook. I answered. "Emma speaking." He didn't waste a second. "Why didn't anyone tell me Valerie fired you?" "That sounds like a question for her," I said softly. A breath shuddered through the line. "Emma, the deal is at risk. That clause exists for a reason. You know that." "I do," I replied. "And I also know I was terminated without warning. I'm not calling to justify it," he said. "I'm calling because I need you to come in." His urgency pulled at me, but I kept my tone even. "I'm not in a position to rush back. I need time to consider my options." For a moment, he didn't speak. "Right, I understand." The anger in his voice wasn't for me, it was for Valerie. "Take the time you need, but please answer when I call again." When the call ended, I rested my hands on the table. Exhaustion pressed behind my eyes, but before I could breathe, my email notification chimed, a message from the Singapore team. "Emma, we only negotiate with you. Is something happening on your end?" The silence is concerning. I exhaled slowly. The partners had begun to sense instability. Valerie had no idea what kind of fire she'd started. I closed my laptop gently, aware that every move I made from this moment forward would decide the fate of the deal and maybe my entire future. Grant insisted on meeting me in person somewhere neutral, somewhere without Valerie's shadow. He suggested a small cafe near Pike Place Market, the kind of place where people spoke quietly and the world felt slightly slowed down. When I arrived, he was already waiting inside, his suit jacket folded beside him, his eyes carrying the weight of someone who had not slept. "Emma," he said as soon as I sat down, "I owe you an apology, a real one. I didn't rush to fill the silence." I waited. He rubbed his hands together. "I trusted Valerie to handle her first 24 hours without burning the building down. That was clearly a mistake. You should never have been put through that." "It happened," I said. "And she made sure it happened loudly." He nodded, jaw tight. "I need you back. The Singapore and Tokyo teams are asking for you by name. Without you, they will either delay the deal or walk away entirely. We cannot afford that outcome." "I know," I said quietly. But I also know that going back into that environment without safeguards is not an option. Tell me what you need, he said. I took a slow breath. Full authority over the negotiation. No shared leadership. No interference. Done. Written protection. I continued. I want documentation ensuring position security for the duration of the project. No political maneuvering behind closed doors. He leaned forward. You have it. And a formal review of Valerie's conduct, I added. Not hidden. Not brushed aside. His expression darkened. That's already in motion. I nodded once. Then I'll return. Grant let out a breath he had been holding. He reached into his bag and slid something across the table. A new badge. Just in case you said yes, he murmured. For the first time since this began, my shoulders loosened. I picked up the badge, feeling the shift inside me quiet, steady, irreversible. When I stepped into the office, the hallway froze. Conversations clipped off mid-sentence. Chairs stopped rolling. A few people looked relieved. Others looked terrified to be caught reacting at all. Carla approached first. You're back, she whispered, eyes bright with something between hope and disbelief. On the project, I said quietly. That's all. Before she could respond, Valerie appeared at the far end of the hallway. Her face was drained of color, but she lifted her chin as if nothing had happened. Emma, she said, voice tight. Glad you decided to return. I'm here to finish the negotiation. I replied. Valerie forced a smile. Of course. I updated the presentation while you were away. You'll find everything ready. I didn't trust her tone. In the conference room. I opened the slide deck she claimed to have cleaned up. My stomach tightened. The financial projections were altered. 2 major figures were wrong, dangerously wrong. If I presented those numbers, the partners would question our competence instantly. I exhaled through my nose. Steady. Sabotage is sloppy work. Valerie, I murmured under my breath. With just seconds left before the call connected, I switched out the corrupted deck and loaded my own copy from my personal drive. When the video window opened, the Singapore director greeted me with a nod. Emma, it has been too long. I smiled. Thank you for your patience. Shall we begin? The meeting moved smoothly until the Q&A. A Tokyo engineer asked a technical question about long-term data stability. Before I could speak, Valerie jumped in. It stabilizes around 14%, she said confidently. The room went silent. That number made no sense. I stepped forward gently. Apologies. The correct figure is 3%. Our system was redesigned to support significantly lower decay over time. My tone stayed calm, even supportive, but Valerie's shoulders tightened. The partners exchanged glances, measured, cautious. The negotiation had survived, but I could feel the air shifting again, uncertain and fragile. By the time the negotiation ended successfully, Valerie was out of excuses and out of places to hide. The partners logged off, satisfied enough to continue, but their careful looks told the story clearly. The instability inside our walls had not gone unnoticed. Grant called me the moment the call ended. Boardroom. Now. When I entered, the board members were already seated in a tight semicircle. Valerie stood near the end of the table, arms crossed, jaw clenched. Grant stepped to the center. We are addressing a serious breach of conduct, he began. Multiple. In fact, he turned to the auditor, who slid several documents forward. First, the unauthorized termination of our lead negotiator. A page flipped. Second, false statements submitted to HR, including claims of hostility and insubordination. Another page. And third, the presentation sabotage documented in today's meeting. Valerie jerked forward. I did not sabotage anything. I corrected outdated numbers. That is not what the version history shows. The auditor replied. All edits originated from your login. Valerie's voice rose. I needed to show strength on day 1. I was told this department lacked discipline. I acted decisively. You acted recklessly. Grant said. You jeopardized a deal worth well over $200 million and risked our relationship with 2 international partners. She looked around the table, searching for support. But no one met her eyes. She sank back, shoulders curling inward. Grant continued. Effective immediately. Valerie Brooks is removed from her managerial role and placed under formal disciplinary review. A heavy silence followed, broken only when Grant turned to me. And for the record, he added, the only reason this contract is still alive is because Emma Calder returned and stabilized the negotiation. The words landed like a quiet shift in gravity. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The board saw everything clearly now. Grant motioned for me to join him outside, the room still stunned by the collapse of the woman who had tried so hard to prove her power. Valerie left the building without saying a word, just the faint echo of heels fading down a hallway that no longer belonged to her. No one followed. No one whispered. The silence around her exit said more than any reprimand ever could. Grant waited until the elevator doors closed behind her before turning to me. Emma, he said quietly, I want you to take over as Director of Strategic Negotiations. I blinked once, steadying myself. That is a significant role. You already do the work, he replied. You hold the trust of partners worth well over $200 million. You stabilize every room you walk into. You deserve the title and the authority that comes with it. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just let out a slow breath, the kind that loosened something heavy inside my chest. Thank you, I said. I'll take it. As I stepped into the hallway, my phone buzzed. My father's voice cracked through the line, warm and familiar. You sound different. Good different. I am, I told him. Things finally make sense. He let out a relieved laugh, the kind that reminded me why every late night and every flight across the world had mattered. I hung up and walked toward the elevator, the new badge cool against my palm. Power wasn't firing people. It wasn't fear, or showmanship, or the need to dominate a room. Real power was quieter, steadier felt, not flaunted. Real power was when a system stalled the moment you stepped away and aligned itself the moment you returned. The elevator opened on the upper floor, reserved for directors. A young employee stood waiting, barely out of college, shifting nervously. Emma, she asked, I heard everything you did. I want to learn from you. Something warm flickered in my chest. I nodded. Come find me tomorrow. We'll start. As the doors closed behind me, I allowed myself one small smile, not triumphant, not gloating, just grounded. I had come back stronger than I left. And this time, I wasn't simply part of the company. I was someone the company would be built around.